I should never have entered that house. But back then, I didn't know that some places aren't just empty, waiting for someone to occupy them. Some places are alive. And like any living thing, they have needs, hunger, desires. It all started with an online ad. An old, large, imposing house with a price that seemed too good to be true. I was desperate for a place to live, and it seemed like the perfect solution. The realtor told me the house had been uninhabited for years, but was in good condition. He lied. Or maybe he didn't know. Maybe no one knew. The first night was quiet. The house was silent, but not in a comforting way. It was the kind of silence that feels like it's watching you, as if it's holding its breath. I felt strange in the moment I stepped inside, but I ignored the feeling. After all, it was just an old house, right? Wrong. On the second day, I started noticing things. Small details that didn't make sense. The basement door, which I was sure I had locked, was slightly ajar. The smell of mold, which I swore had disappeared after cleaning, came back stronger than ever. And the worst part, the sound. A low, almost imperceptible sound coming from the walls. It was like a sigh, long and deep, as if the house was breathing. I tried to rationalize it. I told myself it was the wind or maybe the old plumbing. But deep down, I knew it wasn't any of that. The house was alive, and it knew I was there. On the third day, things got worse. I woke up in the middle of the night to a noise coming from a hallway. It sounded like someone dragging something heavy across the floor. My heart raced, and I lay frozen in bed, listening. The sound stopped suddenly, and for a moment, I thought it was my imagination. But then came the sigh, that same low, drawn-out sound, only now it was closer, much closer. I couldn't sleep the rest of the night. I spent hours staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself everything was fine. But it wasn't. The house was consuming me, little by little. I could feel it. On the fourth day, I discovered the basement. I've never been a fan of enclosed spaces, especially basements. But something pulled me there that morning. It was as if the house wanted me to see. The door, which I had locked again the night before, was open once more. This time, I didn't ignore it. I went down the stairs slowly, each step echoing in the oppressive silence. The air was heavy, filled with a sweet, rotten smell that made me nauseous. When I reached the bottom, I saw something that made me stop breathing. The basement walls were covered in something. It was as if the surface was alive, pulsing faintly. I approached, trying to understand what I was seeing, and then I realized they weren't walls. It was flesh, old, rotting flesh, as if the house had swallowed someone and was slowly digesting them. I recoiled in disgust, but I couldn't look away. The flesh was moving, contracting as if it were breathing, and then came the sound. That same low, drawn-out sigh, but now it was coming from all around me. It was as if the house was laughing at me. I ran back upstairs, locking the basement door behind me. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it would explode. I needed to get out of there. I needed to run. But when I reached the front door, it wouldn't open. I tried with all my strength, but the door didn't budge. It was as if the house didn't want me to leave. And then I realized it was digesting me too. From that day on, everything changed. The house was no longer just a place where I lived. It was a constant presence, always watching, always breathing. The sound of its breath became a part of me, echoing in my mind even when I tried to ignore it. I tried to convince myself I was going crazy, that it was all in my imagination. But the evidence was everywhere. The walls seemed closer, as if they were closing in around me. The smell of mold became unbearable, and I swore I could feel something moving beneath the floor. One night, I woke up with a horrible feeling. Something was wrong. The air was heavy, and I could feel the house's breath stronger than ever. That's when I realized it was calling me. The sound came from the hallway, a low, constant whisper that seemed to say my name. I tried to ignore it, but it was impossible. It was as if the house was inside my mind, pulling me toward it. I don't know how, but I ended up in the basement again. The door was open, as always, and the smell was even worse. This time, I wasn't afraid. I knew what was down there, and I knew I couldn't escape. When I reached the bottom, I saw something that made me fall to my knees. The flesh on the walls was moving faster, as if it were in agony. And then I realized it wasn't just flesh. There was something else there, something that looked human. I approached, trying to understand what I was seeing, and then I saw the face. It was small, almost imperceptible, but it was there, a face, twisted in pain, emerging from the flesh. And then it opened its eyes. The face on the wall stared at me, its eyes filled with suffering I couldn't comprehend. I wanted to run, to scream, to do anything, but I was paralyzed. The house was holding me, as if it wanted me to see. The face moved, trying to speak, but no sound came out. Instead, there was that low, drawn-out sigh, but now it seemed to come from the face. It was as if it was trying to tell me something, but I couldn't understand. I moved closer, tried to hear, and then I realized the face wasn't trying to speak. It was trying to scream. Suddenly, the flesh around the face began to move faster, as if it were trying to swallow it. The face contorted in pain, and I could see the terror in its eyes. It knew what was happening. It knew it was being consumed. I stepped back, horrified, but I couldn't look away. The flesh closed around the face, swallowing it completely, and then everything went quiet. The sound of the breath stopped, and for a moment, I thought it was over. But then came the sigh, louder than ever, coming from all directions. The house was breathing again, and I knew it wouldn't stop. I don't know how long I spent in that house. The days blurred together, and I could no longer tell what was real and what was in my mind. The house was everywhere, inside me, consuming everything I was. I tried to fight, but it was useless. The house was stronger than me. It pulled me in, little by little, until I couldn't resist anymore. The last thing I remember is the sound of the breath, that low, drawn-out sigh, which now seemed to come from within me, and then silence. When I woke up, I was in the basement. The walls were still, and the smell of mold was gone. But I knew it wasn't over. The house was just waiting. I looked at the walls, and then I realized the flesh was there, quiet and motionless. But I knew it wouldn't be long before it started moving again. And when it did, I knew I wouldn't escape. The house was alive, and it was hungry. The days became a thick fog, where time seemed to no longer exist. The house wouldn't let me sleep. When I finally dozed off, I was always awakened by that sigh, low and constant, as if someone were whispering in my ear. I'd wake up sweating, my heart racing, with the feeling that something was watching me. I started seeing things, shadows in the corners of my eyes, figures moving too fast to be real. But the worst was the feeling that I wasn't alone. Someone or something was with me. I could feel the presence like a weight in the air, always there, always watching. One night, I was in the kitchen, trying to convince myself it was all in my imagination, when I heard a noise coming from the living room. It was a soft sound, like someone dragging their feet on the floor. I turned slowly, trying to prepare myself for whatever was there. The living room was empty, but the couch was different. The corner cushion was sunken, as if someone had just gotten up. I approached hesitantly, and then I felt it. The fabric was still warm. I ran to my room and locked the door, but I knew it was no use. The house had no boundaries. It was everywhere, and I couldn't escape. The whispers started that night. They came from the walls, low and distant, like voices from another world. I tried to ignore them, but it was impossible. They were always there, always talking, always calling me. At first, I couldn't understand what they were saying. It was just a confused murmur, like the sound of a distant crowd. But over time, the words became clearer. Stay. You are ours. Don't leave. I covered my ears, screamed for them to stop, but the whispers only grew louder. They were inside my head, echoing in my mind, and I couldn't escape. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I screamed, begging them to stop, and then for a moment, there was silence. But it didn't last long. The sigh returned, louder than ever, and then I heard it. A clear voice, coming from somewhere in the dark. You are already part of us. I began to change. Not physically, at least not at first, but I could feel something inside me. something that didn't belong to me. It was as if the house was infiltrating me, making me a part of it. My memories began to fade. I couldn't remember how I had ended up in that house or what my life was like before it. All I knew was that I couldn't leave. The front door still wouldn't open, and the windows seemed sealed, as if the world outside no longer existed. I looked at myself in the mirror one morning and didn't recognize myself. My eyes were sunken, surrounded by dark circles. My skin was pale, almost translucent. I looked sick, but it wasn't an ordinary illness. It was as if the house was consuming me from the inside. And then the physical changes began. I woke up one night with a sharp pain in my arm. When I looked, I saw something that made me scream. My skin was moving, as if something were trying to come out from underneath it. I tried to touch it, but the pain was unbearable. I ran to the bathroom and looked in the mirror. My skin was stretching, as if it were being pulled by something beneath it. And then I saw it. Something was emerging. It was small at first, but it quickly grew. It was a lump of flesh, pulsing and glistening, as if it were alive. I tried to tear it off, but the pain was so intense that I passed out. When I woke up, the lump had grown even larger. It seemed to breathe. I knew what was happening. The house was transforming me, making me a part of it, and I couldn't do anything to stop it. I am no longer me. I am the house. I feel every breath, every sigh, every movement. I see through the walls, hear the whispers that come from the darkness. The house is not just a place. It is a living organism, and I am a cell within it. Every beat of my heart echoes in the rotten wooden beams. Every thought of mine mingles with the whispers from the walls. I no longer have control over what I am. The house has consumed me, and now I am part of it. I vaguely remember what it was like before. How I would come home from work, sit on the couch, and turn on the TV. How I thought life was simple, that things made sense. But now I know none of that matters. The house has shown me the truth. The world outside is an illusion. The only reality is the house. And it is always hungry. I look at the walls and see the faces. They're there quiet and still, but I know they're alive. They're like me, trapped, consumed, transformed. Some of them tried to fight, but the house is stronger. It always wins. I feel when someone new arrives. The house vibrates with excitement, like a predator scenting its prey. I see them walking to the door, full of hope, unaware of what awaits them. They look around, admiring the old architecture, the spacious rooms, the price that seems too good to be true. And then, slowly they begin to realize. The first sign is always a sound. That low, drawn-out sigh that seems to come from all directions. They try to ignore it, rationalize it, but it's no use. The house is inside them, just as it is inside me. I see them struggle, try to escape, but it's useless. The house won't let them go. It pulls them in, little by little, until nothing is left of them, and then they become part of us. I feel it when it happens. The house vibrates with satisfaction, as if it's just finished a meal, and then everything goes quiet again until the next one, because there's always a next one. I no longer know who I was. My memories are gone, just like my body. I am just a presence now, a part of the house. I no longer have a name, a face, an identity. All that remains is consciousness, floating on the walls, in the dark corners, in the rotten beams. I look at the walls and see the faces. They're all there, quiet and still, but I know they're alive. They are waiting just as I wait. Some of them try to speak, but they can't. The house has silenced them, just as it has silenced me. I remember when I was like them, when I still had hope, when I still believed I could escape. But now I know there is no escape. The house is all that exists. It is a beginning and the end. I feel its breath inside me, pulsing with every beat of what used to be my heart. I am no longer afraid. Fear is a human emotion, and I am no longer human. I am the house. I look at the walls and see the faces. They're all there, quiet and still, but I know they're alive. They are waiting, just as I wait. The house is alive, and it is always hungry. I hear the door open. Someone has entered. The house vibrates with excitement, like a predator scenting its prey. I feel their emotions, their hope, and then their fear. They are here. I see them coming to the door, unaware of what awaits them. They look around, admiring the old architecture, the spacious rooms, the price that seems too good to be true. And then, slowly they begin to realize. The first sign is always a sound. That low, drawn-out sigh that seems to come from all directions. They try to ignore it, rationalize it, but it's no use. The house is inside them, just as it is inside me. I see them struggle, trying to escape, but it's useless. The house won't let them go. It pulls them in, little by little, until nothing is left of them. And then they become part of us. I feel it when it happens. The house vibrates with satisfaction, as if it has just finished a meal. And then everything goes quiet again until the next one, because there is always a next one. The house is alive, and it is always hungry. They don't know what awaits them. They don't know the house is alive. I see them coming to the door, unaware of what awaits them. I feel their emotions, their hope, and then their fear. The house consumes them, little by little, until nothing is left of them. And then they become part of us. The house is alive, and it is always hungry. I look at the walls and see the faces. They're all there, quiet and still, but I know they are alive. They are waiting, just as I wait. The house is breathing, and it never stops.